I didn't even notice it at first. Just a pale sliver beside the drain, like a piece of rice or a fingernail clipping. But when I reached to rinse it away, I saw it had a tiny gold filling. I froze. It was a tooth. Her tooth. And she hadn't lived here in over 2 weeks. This wasn't a horror story. There was no blood, no broken glass. Just a single, perfectly intact molar sitting like a fossil in our bathroom sink. In the apartment she swore she needed space from. I stared at it for a long time. Then I did what any emotionally constipated manchild would do. I wrapped it in toilet paper, stuck it in the drawer under the sink, and tried to pretend I hadn't seen it. Like maybe it was some metaphor I wasn't smart enough to understand. That was the moment I realized something was seriously wrong. But let me back up. No, not all the way to the beginning. You don't need a love story here. That's not what this is. I'm not going to tell you how we met, or what she smelled like in the fall of 2019. None of that matters anymore. She killed it when she said the words. I just need a break, okay? Not forever. Just a pause. She smiled like it was reasonable, like she hadn't just sucker punched me in the middle of folding laundry. So I gave her what she wanted. I left, took my laptop, my chargers, 2 pairs of socks, and a hoodie that still smelled like her coconut shampoo. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't do any of the things men like me are known for doing. I just disappeared. And maybe that was my mistake. See, I thought the break was real. I thought it was like hitting pause on a movie. You come back, press play, pick up where you left off. But she pressed delete. And the things I found when I returned to that apartment weeks later, they weren't just disturbing. They were unexplainable. The tooth was just the start. There were other clues. Subtle ones. Quiet ones. Intentional ones. Like she wanted me to find them. Like it was a game. And somewhere deep in my gut, I knew. She wasn't done with me. Not by a long shot. It took me 3 full days to stop thinking about the tooth. I had no idea how it got there, or why she'd leave it behind. I told myself it must have been old. Maybe from before she left, from some accident I never noticed. But that didn't make sense. She'd never lost a tooth before. She would have told me, right? I mean, we shared a goddamn bank account, a Netflix password, a bed. You'd think I'd know if she was missing a molar. By the 4th day, I went back. Not because I missed her, though I did. Pathetically so, but because something didn't feel finished. And maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. Or maybe I wanted to feel close to her in the weirdest, most broken way possible. I told myself I was just picking up the rest of my stuff. That's all. Just my blue hoodie, my books, my ugly slippers. But that was a lie. I walked into that apartment, and it felt colder. Not just emotionally. Literally colder. I checked the thermostat. Same as always. 71 degrees. But the air felt wrong, like it had been left untouched for weeks. Like the walls were holding their breath. Dust coated the plants on the windowsill. Her puzzle box, the one she used to unwind, was half finished on the coffee table, the edges curled with moisture. My key still worked. That part surprised me more than it should have. I thought she'd change the locks. I would have. I walked through the place slowly, like it was a museum of a life that no longer belonged to me. And then I opened the freezer. I wasn't even hungry. I don't know. Habit. Comfort. Maybe some frozen pizza, a beer, anything to make this feel normal. But instead of food, there was a folded piece of paper stuck to the bottom drawer, weighed down by a bag of frozen peas. A list. Nothing else in the freezer. Just peas and that. I pulled it out with shaking hands. It was still cold, still stiff, and a little wet along the edges like it had been there for a while. And it wasn't written in her handwriting. Not even close. Marley had this messy, curling script that always slanted to the left, like it was falling asleep mid-sentence. This list was printed in perfect block letters. Mechanical, clean, cold. No loops. No emotion. Like it had been typed by hand. It read, tooth, keys, water bottle, charger. Enough. That's it. 5 items. One of them in quotation marks. And the first one? Tooth. I sat on the kitchen floor for 20 minutes, just staring at the paper like it might blink or bleed or suddenly make sense. But it didn't. Because if she didn't write this list, who did? And why the hell was it in my freezer? I didn't sleep that night. Or the one after. I kept the list. I kept the damn thing in my pocket like some cursed artifact, unfolding it every few hours as if a new word might appear. I even tried to convince myself it was hers, that maybe she just felt like switching up her writing style. You know, like some people dye their hair after a breakup. But that wasn't it. I knew her penmanship like I knew her voice. This wasn't hers. This list belonged to someone else. By the fifth day, I did something I hadn't done since the break. I opened Spotify. Marley and I used to share a joint account. It was one of those things we never officially talked about, but once we moved in together, it just made sense. Her playlists were like portals into her moods. She had one for walking in the rain, one for cooking risotto, one that was literally titled Songs I Hate But Dance To. She hadn't updated anything since she left. Until now. The one called Kitchen Ghosts had a new song added that morning. I stared at the title for a long time, unsure whether I was more disturbed by the update itself or the fact that she picked that playlist of all of them. Kitchen Ghosts had always been her throwaway mix. Lo-fi beats, ambient sounds, instrumental junk. She'd put it on when she didn't want to think, when she needed to disappear into herself. It was the kind of playlist you leave on loop while washing dishes or staring out the window wondering where your life went sideways. But now, it had a song I didn't recognize. What Remains After You by Edric Hollow. I clicked it. Big mistake. The track was just a slow, distorted piano loop. Something that sounded like it was recorded underwater, with faint static and a low hum like someone was breathing through a wall. There were no lyrics. No melody. Just this sinking, decaying atmosphere that made my skin crawl. I looked up the artist. Nothing. No albums. No profiles. No Instagram. I even Googled it. The only result was a forum post from 2014 where someone said the name Edric Hollow was a pseudonym used in a now-defunct conceptual sound experiment designed to evoke auditory grief. Auditory grief. Who thinks like that? I slammed my laptop shut, heart pounding. I wanted to call her. Just call her and ask, what is going on? Are you okay? Are you watching me? Did you leave me? Or did you lose yourself? But I didn't, because I already knew she wouldn't answer. I hadn't heard from her in 32 days. Not a call, not a text, not a single breadcrumb. Or maybe I had. Maybe all this was the breadcrumb. The tooth. The list. The playlist. It felt less like she was sending a message, and more like she was building something. Constructing a map only I was meant to follow. And I was following it. Which meant I was either getting closer to answers, or walking straight into something I wasn't supposed to find. I didn't go back for a while after the playlist. I told myself I needed space, that I was letting it get to my head. But the truth is, I was scared. Not of Marley. No, never her. But of what I'd find if I kept digging. Every weird little detail just chipped away at the version of her I thought I knew. The girl who once cried during Pixar trailers was now embedding cryptic songs into playlists and leaving teeth in sinks like it was a scavenger hunt from hell. But then something even weirder happened. Rafe, my cousin, told me I'd been talking in my sleep. He said I'd sit up, eyes open but unseeing, and mutter things like, it's not on the list, or she left the door open again. I laughed it off, but the next morning I found scratches on my forearm. 3 thin, parallel lines. I don't bite my nails. I don't have a pet. I sleep alone. So I went back. The apartment looked the same, almost. You ever get that feeling when you walk into a room and immediately sense something's changed, even if you can't say what? That's what it was like. The air had shifted, like someone had just been there and barely managed to leave before I opened the door. There was dust on the windowsill, more than before, but the coffee table had been wiped clean. No puzzle, no coasters, just emptiness. I checked the fridge. Still empty. The bathroom? Still spotless, except the drawer under the sink where I'd hidden the tooth was open. I know I closed it. I'm sure of it. That's when I noticed the hallway closet. Now, here's something you need to understand. That closet never locked. It didn't even have a lock. Just one of those old brass knobs that rattled when you touched it. But today, the knob didn't rattle. It was stiff, frozen in place. I tugged harder, and the whole door trembled like it was braced from the inside. Something was holding it shut. I stepped back. My pulse kicked up. I stood there staring at that door for minutes, probably longer, trying to convince myself it was warped wood, humidity, maybe a dropped coat hanger jamming the track. Something reasonable. Something boring. But then I heard it. A faint tapping. 3 knocks. Slow. Hollow. Like a warning. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just stood there, suddenly freezing cold, while my brain flipped through every possible rational explanation and found none that made sense. I said her name out loud. Marley. Nothing. Then I did the stupidest thing I've ever done. I leaned forward and whispered, If you're in there, just open the door. Please. More silence. Then, the knob twitched, not a full turn, just a flick, like someone testing if I was still on the other side. I backed away slowly, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack a rib. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. It was like my whole body was stuck between fight and flight, and I chose freeze, because that's what I do. I freeze. I let people leave me. I let them trap me in closets I can't open. Eventually, I left. Not because I was brave, but because my phone vibrated, a random calendar reminder I'd forgotten to delete. Pick up almond milk. Marley was allergic to almonds. That reminder shouldn't have existed. We never bought almond milk. Never. But it was in my phone. Scheduled for today. Created by her Apple ID. I stared at the screen, hands trembling, and realized something I hadn't considered before. This wasn't a breakup. This was a setup. And I was already inside it. I didn't go straight back the next day. I needed to pretend I had a real life. I needed to at least act like I wasn't spiraling into some kind of low-budget psychological thriller. So I went to a coffee shop, did meaningless admin work for my sad little PC part store, and stared blankly at a spreadsheet I didn't even remember making. But my brain kept playing reruns of that closet door, the stiffness of the knob, the tapping, the sound it made when it shifted just slightly under my hand like something was breathing behind it. I felt like a man walking around with a thread still tied to something he left behind, and every second away from that apartment pulled the thread tighter around my ribs. So I went back. Again. This time, though, I brought a flashlight. And gloves. And a screwdriver. It sounds stupid now, like I was planning to fight off ghosts with basic hand tools, but I needed something. I needed to stop feeling helpless. I didn't go near the closet, not at first. I went upstairs. See, our duplex wasn't fancy, but it had one of those low, rectangular attic hatches in the hallway ceiling. It was the kind of thing we never used. Honestly, I forgot it even existed until that night when I noticed a faint line of dust leading from the bathroom to directly beneath the attic door. It wasn't a normal footprint trail. It looked like someone had dragged a long object across the floor. A pole, a broom handle, or maybe a chair. And that's when it hit me. There was no ladder. If someone had gone up there recently, they had to bring something to stand on and leave no trace of it behind. So either it was me, it wasn't, or someone else had been in the apartment. I stood there for a long time, just staring at that stupid square in the ceiling. My hands were sweaty, my stomach in knots. Every reasonable part of my brain told me not to open it. Just leave. Call someone. Anyone. But that other part, the stubborn, broken, lovesick part, whispered, "What if she left something for you? What if it explains everything?" So I got a chair from the kitchen. I climbed up, and I pushed. It didn't budge. I pushed harder. Still nothing. Then I noticed it. A row of tiny nail heads along the edge of the hatch, hammered in from the inside. Not screws. Nails. Dozens of them. Carefully placed, one every inch, like someone wanted to seal whatever was up there permanently. And I don't know what came over me, but I started prying them out. It took nearly half an hour. The wood cracked in places. The flashlight kept slipping out of my pocket and hitting me in the chest. My hands started cramping. But one by one, I pulled those nails free until I could wedge the screwdriver under the lip and lift the hatch open. The smell hit me first. Not rot, not mold, but metal, cold and stale, like rusted pipes and something long sealed away. I pulled myself up halfway and shined the flashlight around. The attic was mostly empty, except for the far corner, where someone had arranged objects in a perfect square on the insulation-covered floor. For things, one at each corner. A ceramic mug, a lock of hair tied with string, a burned photo I couldn't quite make out, and a folded piece of cloth I instantly recognized. It was my t-shirt, one I hadn't seen in months. I crawled closer, my breath fogging in the beam of the flashlight. The mug was filled with water. No, not water. I leaned in closer. It was some kind of cloudy liquid with small particles floating inside. I don't know what I expected, but when I tried to pick it up, it was warm, like it had just been poured. That's when I noticed the writing on the plywood wall behind the objects. It was faint, scratched into the surface, not drawn, and nearly invisible unless the light hit it at the right angle. It read, "The list was not yours to read. Go back. Before it starts." I didn't move for almost a full minute. I felt something shift behind me. Not a sound, not a breeze, just the feeling that I was no longer alone in that attic. I scrambled back down, nearly falling off the chair. My flashlight dropped and spun wildly on the floor, casting dizzy shadows up the walls. I didn't look back. I slammed the attic hatch shut, and this time, I nailed it closed from the outside. Whatever was up there, it wasn't mine to understand. But I knew, deep in my gut, that this wasn't just about Marley leaving. This wasn't grief. This wasn't abandonment. This was a game, or a ritual, or a warning, and I had already played too far into it to stop. I couldn't stop thinking about the arrangement in the attic. The mug, the cloth, the lock of hair. But it was the photo that haunted me most. Not because it was burned, but because even in that charred corner, I could see my own face, younger, caught mid-laugh. It was unmistakably me. What I couldn't figure out was where it came from. I don't remember ever taking that photo. And worse, I wasn't alone in it. There were two others. Marley, of course. But the third face, partially scorched, just enough to obscure the eyes and most of the jaw, didn't match anyone I knew. The posture was familiar, like the person was leaning into the frame casually, almost affectionately. Whoever it was, they had their hand on Marley's shoulder. I tried to shake it off. Told myself it was just an old photo from one of her art projects, some memory I'd forgotten. But something didn't add up. The way Marley was dressed in the image, it was the same sweater she'd worn the day we signed our lease. That was only a year and a half ago. Not some college memory. Not pre-fin. That night, I scanned the photo and ran it through an AI photo enhancement tool online. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I had to try something. I cropped out the burned portion and uploaded the rest. It reconstructed some of the missing pieces, subtly, artificially. But when the preview finished loading, I felt a chill move through my body like I'd just been dropped into freezing water. The third person's face became clearer. And I swear to you, he looked exactly like me. Not just vaguely. Not just, could be your cousin similar. I mean a mirror. Same chin. Same hairline. Same small scar above the right eyebrow I got from falling off my bike when I was 10. But the eyes were wrong. They were too wide. Too alert. And the expression was cold. Controlled. I stared at the screen for so long I forgot to blink. And when I finally moved, I had this involuntary shudder, like something had just stepped over my grave and smiled. I shut the laptop, left the room, sat on the floor of the hallway, knees pulled to my chest, trying to piece together a reality that no longer felt like mine. If that photo was real, and I had no reason to believe it wasn't, then there were only a few explanations, and none of them made sense. Was it photoshopped? Some elaborate manipulation? But who would do that and why? And if it was real, if there was someone out there who looked exactly like me, who had been that close to Marley, what the hell did that mean? And that's when I remembered the name. Edric Hollow. The fake musician. The empty Google results. The one-song Spotify mystery that had somehow appeared on Marley's playlist just after she left. It felt connected now, like everything was part of a design I hadn't seen until it was too late. I reopened the laptop, went back to the track, and played it again, this time with headphones, volume cranked. Same static. Same underwater piano. But now, underneath the sound, I noticed something faint. A voice. Not lyrics, nothing that coherent. Just a murmur, almost a whisper, like someone speaking just outside the room you're in. I replayed the section 5, 6, 7 times, isolating it with an equalizer, and then I finally heard it. He doesn't remember. Keep showing him. He'll see it soon. My blood ran cold. I yanked the headphones off and stared at the screen. My own reflection stared back at me in the black gloss. And for just 1 second, just a flicker, I could have sworn the reflection didn't move when I did. I closed the laptop. I wanted to call someone. Anyone. But who the hell do you call when you suspect your missing wife left behind a haunted photograph of you with your own twin, who doesn't exist, and an audio file that seems to be predicting your thoughts? I grabbed my keys. I needed air. Movement. Distance. But when I opened the door to leave, there was something waiting for me. A package. Wrapped in butcher paper, tied with twine, no return address. On the front, written in neat block letters, the same handwriting from the list in the freezer, was a message. For when you're ready to see who you really were. Not were. I carried it back inside, hands shaking, heart pounding, every nerve in my body screaming not to open it. But you already know what I did. I sat on the floor for a long time with that package in my lap, staring at it like it might explode. The paper was thick and fibrous, stained in one corner with something brown and brittle, coffee maybe, or blood. I didn't want to ask. The twine was tied tight in a perfect square knot. One of those things you learn from YouTube survival videos, but never use unless you're trying to trap something. Or someone. I untied it slowly, not because I was being careful, but because every part of me was screaming to stop. This wasn't just a delivery. This was a message, maybe a trap, maybe an answer. But it wasn't innocent. Nothing about it was innocent. Not after the tooth. The list. The playlist. The attic. Inside was a black external hard drive. Old. Bulky. No logos. Just a single USB cable wound tightly around it. And beneath it, folded in half, was a piece of printer paper with something typed in that same cold, mechanical font I now knew by heart. It read, "You wrote this, even if you don't remember." That's it. No date. No signature. Just those words, spaced exactly in the center like some kind of tombstone. I stared at the sentence for a long time, my brain cycling through denial, then curiosity, then this slow, rising terror that maybe I had written it. Maybe I had done more than I remembered. Maybe the man I thought I was, the man grieving his wife and slowly losing his grip, wasn't the one who lived here at all. I plugged in the drive. There was only one folder. No title. Just a timestamp from 8 months ago, long before Marley left, long before anything started to unravel. Inside the folder were 3 files. One was a text document. The other 2 were videos. I opened the document first. It was a journal. My name was in the header. My tone, my writing style. But I didn't recognize the entries. They were written in the first person, addressed to someone named E.H. Initials that matched the Edric Hollow playlist. At first, I thought maybe I'd been writing some kind of fictional blog and forgot about it. But the entries got darker. More personal. One of them described a dream where I was trapped in a house that shifted every time I closed my eyes. A dream I'd actually had just weeks ago, but never told anyone about. Another one described finding a list in the freezer, word for word, before it ever happened. The last entry simply read, "She said she'd come back after the break. But she's been back. Many times. I just keep forgetting who she is." My chest tightened. It wasn't possible. Someone was playing a game with me, planting fake entries, accessing my laptop, messing with my memories. That had to be it. I opened the first video. It was grainy, low-res, clearly recorded on a phone propped against something unstable. The camera showed my living room, same angle as the corner where Marley used to do puzzles. The time code was from 5 months ago. I watched as I entered the frame. Me. Wearing a shirt I remembered throwing out over a year ago. My movements were jerky, distracted. I was talking to someone off-screen, but I couldn't hear any audio. The footage had no sound. Then Marley appeared. She walked into frame, handed me something small, something I stuffed into my pocket without looking, and then she leaned in, whispered something into my ear. And I laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not a shocked laugh. A real, genuine laugh. The kind of laugh you only make when you're in on the joke. And then I kissed her. I watched myself kiss a woman I hadn't seen in weeks. A woman I thought had abandoned me. A woman I had buried in grief and confusion and unanswered questions. And there I was, touching her like nothing had ever gone wrong. The video cut off abruptly. I sat in silence, my stomach twisting, my mind rejecting what I had just seen. Had I forgotten that day? Had she come back and I somehow blacked it out? Or was the footage fabricated? It had to be. It had to be. I opened the second video. Different room. My bedroom. Same timestamp. This time, it was just Marley, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring directly into the camera. The quality was better, and the sound worked. She looked tired. Hollow. But not scared. She spoke. "If you're watching this, then it means it happened again. You don't remember. You never do. And I don't know how many more times I can bring you back." She looked down for a moment. Her fingers twisted in her lap. She looked up again. "The break was your idea, Finn. You said you needed to reset, to forget the bad parts. But it doesn't work. Every time I bring you back, you lose more of yourself. I think this version is breaking for good." She reached toward the camera, and the video cut out. I sat in the dark for a long time, replaying her words over and over in my head. This version is breaking for good. What did that mean? What did reset mean? What did bring me back mean? I didn't sleep that night. I watched the second video 11 more times. And by sunrise, I realized I no longer knew which parts of my life were memories, and which were recordings someone wanted me to believe. For 2 days, I didn't leave the apartment. I didn't check the store. I didn't text anyone back. I just sat in the corner of the bedroom with the hard drive still plugged in, my laptop open to Marley's face frozen on the final frame of the last video. The more I stared at it, the more I realized how much pain she had hidden from me. She had the eyes of someone who'd repeated something too many times. Not out of duty, but out of love. Exhausted, but refusing to give up. Everything I thought was abandonment. The silence, the weird clues, the disappearing, it wasn't cruelty. It wasn't a trick. It was her holding on to someone who kept slipping away. Me. The journals, the voice in the audio file, the lists, the attic, it all started to make a different kind of sense. I wasn't being gaslit. I wasn't being haunted. I was being rebuilt. Over and over. I started digging deeper into the files. The hard drive had more than I originally saw. Hidden folders nested within hidden folders. There were backup logs, date-stamped snapshots of conversations, even saved voicemails. Most of them from Marley. Some of them from a version of me who sounded sharper, clearer, more in control. Apparently, I'd been living with early-onset dissociative memory degeneration, something that had been quietly building for years without a formal diagnosis. I'd refused treatment. I'd refused help. I'd written long emails to Marley, ones I never remembered, telling her to let me forget if it means I can live without fear. I had asked her to not remind me who I was every time I started to slip. But she never could let go. She stayed. Even when I forgot her. Even when I forgot myself. Each reset was a protocol I had written myself, saved to an encrypted file. Each time I started to spiral, she followed the instructions I'd left behind. Show him the object, leave the list, add the song. Let him think it's a mystery, because that's the only way he pays attention. I needed breadcrumbs, not explanations. It sounded insane. It was insane, but it was my own design. A coping mechanism written by the very man who feared becoming someone else entirely. I cried for hours. Not the loud, sobbing kind. Just quiet, aching tears of guilt and relief. I had been so angry with her. So bitter. And the whole time, she had been protecting a version of me I couldn't even remember being. On the third day, I left the apartment. It was bright outside, brighter than I remembered. The sun hit differently when you hadn't let yourself feel it in weeks. I walked through our neighborhood, past the coffee shop she liked, past the bookstore where we once got caught in a thunderstorm. I remembered that, not the full day, just pieces of it. Laughter, the smell of wet leaves, the warmth of her hand pulling mine. I went to the park bench where we used to sit when we needed space, but not too much of it. She used to call it our in-between spot. And she was there, Marley, sitting exactly where she used to, coffee in hand, puzzle book open in her lap, like nothing had changed. Like she had always been there. Waiting. I walked up slowly. My voice cracked when I said her name. She looked up. Her eyes were glassy, but she smiled. And not like someone seeing a ghost. Like someone watching a storm finally pass. You remember? She asked gently. Not everything, I said, sitting beside her. But enough. And that was true. Enough to know that she never left me. Enough to know that the break was never a goodbye. Enough to know that I wanted to stay. Not just in the memory, but in the life we still had a chance to rebuild. She reached over and took my hand. I don't want to reset again, I said quietly. Not ever. You won't, she whispered. This time you stayed.